Woohoo! I am so excited. Tonight we are going to learn about iridology as it relates to the endocrine system, but specifically blood sugar markers. Now, normally I only do one of these webinars every couple of weeks, but I'm jamming a couple together just because of some scheduling stuff that's coming up. And so next week, we are going to be doing the blood sugar marker case studies. So if you're interested in, after we've done tonight, if you're interested in following through and seeing what would an actual analysis look like, where we're stringing lots of different things together and triangulating things, you'll want to join me next week. Welcome, and I'm just so glad you're here. I'm planning on having fun tonight. I hope you are too. I think we learn better when we have fun. And so I'm going to try to have a ton of fun. We're going to be together for about 90 minutes, so I hope you've blocked off 90 minutes to stay with me for the whole time. And I'm encouraging you to stay with me right till the very end, because I've got a new exciting announcement for you. And it's something that some of you who have been hanging out with me quite a bit lately have been asking for. So it's a really cool surprise, so I hope you'll stay with me. Regardless of whether your specialty is nutrition or herbology, I promise you're going to leave today's session with something you can use with your next clients. And I'm just so excited that you're with me. That tells me that regardless of what your training already is, you want to keep learning and you want to keep doing your very best for yourself and for your clients. I'm going to ask you to type some things in. I'm going to ask you to also play all in with me today. Really participate when I ask for it, because you'll find that by doing the things, it may seem silly, raise your hand or type this word in or things like that. But the more engaged you are, the more you will learn. It's been a proven fact. The more engaged you are, the more you will learn. I'm going to let my ego show a little bit. Please turn off any extraneous electronic devices. Like if you're viewing this tonight with me on your computer, turn off your tablet, turn off your phone, turn off the distractions so you can stay with me and stay focused, because I am going to be teaching you some iridology. The first thing I would like you to type in, if you would please, is I want to know what your background is. Do you have training in holistic health? Do you have holistic nutrition? Do you have herbology? Are you a body worker of some kind, massage or acupuncture? I'd love you to type that in, because it will help me to tweak the presentation on the fly to make it more useful for you. So I'm just going to grab a sip of water while you take just a minute and use your lightning fingers to type things in. Oh, my stars, Karen is fast tonight. Whew, whew. All right, that's awesome. And keep them coming in. We're a small group, so I'm going to know if you haven't participated. Just saying. So Karen is a CNHP digestive health specialist, and she's also soon to be one of the grads of this program, of this course. Karen, I hope you don't mind me saying that you are working on your exams now, and we're really excited about that. We have someone who does reflexology and muscle testing. Karen says she's really excited too to get her test done. I bet you are. Awesome. That's great. So a couple of you haven't weighed in. I'd love it if you would. If you just share with me, what is your holistic healing background? And if you don't have anything, if you're just starting out, let me know that too, because I will include that in how I tweak the presentation. So just keep those answers coming in so that I can make sure that I make this presentation work for you. Oh, and Pretty Healthy, which sounds like, I'm not sure if that's your real name, but it sure is nice. RNCP, CNP, ROHP, and CCN. So you've got a ton of holistic nutrition under your belt. Well done. Well done. I am glad you are with me tonight. And it's nice to hear from you, a fellow nutrition expert. Love it. Okay, so we want to talk about why we want to learn some iridology stuff first before we start learning anything. And most of us actually face a few challenges in our businesses, whether we're just starting out or whether we've been around the block a time or two. And I will be introducing myself formally in a couple of slides, so I won't do that right here. One of the first challenges that we have, and we have these challenges partially because of how we're taught in school. One of the first challenges we have is we don't know exactly where to start in making our therapeutic recommendations or setting our therapeutic priorities. And that's really important because, when we're in school, we're not taught how to find a starting place and set a sequence. We're taught how to do massive case studies. And that's not how you work in real practice. And you might have noticed that if you are in practice. You might be spending a lot of your own time outside of your client time doing research and program development for your clients. So you meet with your client, you do that intake, you give them one or two things to start with while you go off and spend 2 or 3 or 4 hours putting together a beautiful detailed report to give back to your client. That's not a smart way to spend your time. Unless you're charging like $300 for a session, you're not being paid for the time that you're putting the reports together. Those reports are not necessary. I'm going to show you tonight how to not do reports ever again. How many of you actually write extensive reports to give to your clients? If you would just raise your hand. None of you? I am so proud of you. Oh my stars. This is the first group I've ever taught where people didn't go and spend 2 or 3 or 4 hours writing reports. Woohoo! The problem with those reports and with not knowing where to start is that we often overwhelm our clients with so much information. They either don't want to come back after the second appointment or they don't need to because they've got it all. Some of you also might even have some iridology training under your belt. Now, I know Karen does. The rest of you, please raise your hand. Do you have any iridology training under your belt already? No. So you're all brand new to this. That's very cool. Awesome. I'm excited then because you are really going to have some fun learning some good stuff tonight. All right. So how do I know that those are your challenges? I know those are your challenges because I've been there myself. When I started in the wellness industry 38 years ago, no one taught me how to create a program. And so I would see the client. Often we'd book an hour. 3 hours later, they'd still be with me as I was fire hosing them with way more information than they needed. No one taught me how to break it down into doable chunks, how to choose a starting point, nothing like that. I figured that out on my own because I'm pretty smart like that. But I've also interviewed a lot of nutritionists and herbalists and other holistic practitioners, and almost all of them have been there too. So if you are there right now, you don't need to stay there. I'm going to start showing you tonight how to not do that anymore. So this is me. This is who I am and why I am qualified to share this information with you. I've been a holistic health coach since 1981, master herbalist since 1983, nutritional consulting practitioner since 94, natural nutrition clinical practitioner since 2016. So this is 2 different professional organizations. I've been an iridologist since way longer than 93, but I certified for the first time in 93. In 2016, I added the iridology instructor credential, although I'd been teaching iridology for many years as well. I've been teaching wellness professionals since 1985. When I started way back in the early 80s, we didn't have the internet. I don't know how old that's making me sound. There were actually very few classes where I live. There was one holistic healing school that had just started, but it wasn't big. and it didn't have much to offer by way of courses. And so as I started studying and learning and taking classes and taking workshops, most of them I had to travel to take, or they were correspondence. As I started amassing the information, I realized that there were a lot of other people like me who wanted to work in the industry but didn't know where to go for training. So I started teaching anybody who would listen. And that was how I got my start with the teaching end of things. I'm the wife of 1, the mom of 7, and the grandma of 7. And you know what? In all these years, because no one taught me how to set up my business, no one taught me how to work efficiently, I made a lot of mistakes. I've taken a lot of classes that after the class I thought, that was not the best investment of my time or money. But over the years, I've learned what works. I've learned how to make it work better. And so that's also a part of what I'm going to teach, both in tonight and in the scope of the courses that I teach. If you think you would benefit from learning how to not waste your time, learning how to work more efficiently, and learning how to work in a way that gives your clients what they need, but encourages them to come back for regular appointments 3 or 4 times a year, would that be of interest to you? Would you like to have lots of repeat clients? If that sounds cool, raise your hand. All right. Thanks, Larissa. I appreciate you weighing in on that. Excellent. Thank you. Okay. Well, let's keep rolling forward because iridology can help you eliminate lengthy intake forms. You know, I've had clients, and I shouldn't say clients, I've had students who have intake forms that are 20 pages long. I think that is a travesty. I think it's just wrong. I think it's bad form. Because when you do a lengthy intake form, you know what happens, right? Whether it's submitted electronically or whether it's on paper, when the practitioner comes into the room, they're either looking down at this book, aka this lengthy intake form, or they go in and they log onto their computer right away to look at the digital forms. There's not a lot of eye contact. There's not a lot of interpersonal relationship to start creating that rapport that we need to have as holistic practitioners. Iridology is going to help you to get rid of the intake. Keep your waiver or release form. You need that for protection. And it's going to help you also to start with creating deep rapport from the moment the consultation starts. It's also going to help you learn how to do a core assessment in less than 5 minutes. And I'm going to demonstrate that towards the end of our time together. It will help you to know the right questions to ask. This is so important. Iridology does not give us answers. Iridology is not a crystal ball that tells us things, except that it tells us what questions to ask. Iridology never gives us the name of a disease. And so when we know what questions to ask, when we ask those questions, we can begin to prioritize what needs to be dealt with first, and we can begin to create our list of therapeutic sequences, which is so important. When I do an iris assessment for the very first time with a client, I end up with a little column of notes in my client file that says, today we're going to work with this and this. Next appointment, it'll be this. Next appointment, this. Next appointment, this. Next appointment, this. Next appointment, this. Not that it's cast in stone, but I have a map of where I think I want to go, what their eyes have taught me about them, what they have taught me about themselves, and I can schedule it out fairly nicely. Now, certainly sometimes things change and I have to change the direction or add some different pieces in, but at least I've got a plan. And I can use that plan then with my client to say, well, today we're starting here, and this is what I'm suggesting we work on. And when we've gotten to this point with this part of the project, we need to move over and work on this part over here. So they always know there's a plan. They always know there's a direction we're moving in. With iridology, we get rid of that unpaid homework time. You won't, if you just didn't raise your hand because you didn't want to be guilty of writing reports on your own time, we're going to get rid of those reports anyways. I'm going to show you how. And because we're not writing massive, huge reports, we won't be overwhelming our clients anymore. We'll break the homework into doable steps. Okay, and that's really important. Now, those of you who maybe have some iridology training but just didn't want to admit it, what I want to tell you is a lot of times in an iridology class, you are taught strictly iridology. You're not taught anything else. You're not taught how to integrate it into your practice. And I personally think that's a huge mistake. I've had several iridology students who were certified by other big name practitioners here in North America, but they were never taught how to use it, and consequently, they didn't use it. I even had one student who had purchased an iridology camera after she had graduated from an iridology course, and the camera sat in its original packaging for 8 years till she came and studied with me. And when I taught her within the first 2 or 3 classes, we were already talking about how to integrate all of her training. She was a naturopath. And as I taught her how to do that, she sent me an email saying, I finally opened my camera. I know how to use this. This is great. This is fun stuff. So I hope this is not sounding too good to be true, that we could help you get rid of unpaid homework. We could help you create rapport. We could help you create a therapeutic priority sequence that will keep your clients wanting to come back to see you, and have you give them good value every time they do see you. That is so, so important. Want to get rid of those lengthy intake forms. I had one student who said that she had worked with a client that day, and the client had paid for 1 hour, but the practitioner gave her 3. We were early on in the course. And the client had complained about filling out 3 pages of intake because she had serious arthritis. Well, let's just get rid of that. Let's not torture our clients at all. Now, some of you may be thinking, okay, but to do this, I need a camera, right? Maybe you've gone online and you've seen a lot of the big name iridologists, and they do those really nice in-clinic pictures where they've got the client sitting across the table and they've got this big fancy camera on a big fancy stand and they're taking iridology photos. And so you're thinking, I could never do iridology because I don't have $5,000 for a camera. I'm here to tell you, you don't need the camera. The camera is fun. I have it. This is my 3rd camera. I love it. All the images we look at tonight, well, most of them were taken with this camera. And I love it. It makes things easier, but it's not where we started. When I started iridology, I started with this. I started with an 8X jeweler's loop and a pen light. You can buy a really great LED pen light and a really great 8X jeweler's loop on Amazon these days. You probably find them somewhere, even like a stamp collecting shop. The other piece of equipment that I like is a lighted magnifying glass. Got this off Amazon as well. And what I love about this one is it has 3 interchangeable lenses, so 3X, 5X, 10X. And I like each of these setups for different reasons. I like this one because it's one-hand operation. But because the light is fixed and not movable, it limits what I can see. Your magnifying glass has the sweet spot in the middle. This light shines in the middle. I can't play with the lighting. And sometimes we need to play with the lighting to see different features in an eye. This lets me play with the lighting. I can move the light around. It doesn't need to be in the exact same position in relation to my magnifying device, right? Now, having said that, I'm actually going to hopefully very soon be purchasing an extra lens and lighting setup to go on this camera because the other lighting system I'm looking at will serve different purposes than this system does. So just looking to get the best options for imaging, whether I'm doing handheld or whether I'm doing photographic. So for you, if you don't have 5,000 sitting in your back pocket just waiting to be spent on a piece of beautiful equipment, spend 50 or 75 instead on this kind of equipment because it will serve you well, totally portable, easy to use, and it's a great place to start. Let's do a quick review of the endocrine system. Just a quick show of hands. Again, raise your hand. Do you have a basic understanding of the endocrine system? Just so that I know how detailed I need to get with this. Do you know what the basic glands are in the endocrine system? Some of you may not, or maybe some of you don't have the ability to click that raise hand icon. All right, well, let's do a quick little check-in on this one then. The endocrine system is made up of glands that secrete their substances directly into the bloodstream. Those substances are known as hormones. Starting at the top, the endocrine system is made up of the pineal, pituitary, hypothalamus, thyroid and parathyroids, thymus, pancreas, adrenals, ovaries, testes in the man, and during pregnancy, the placenta also functions as an endocrine gland. There has been a lot of research in the last 25 years that has underscored the fact that there are other tissues in our body that also function as endocrine tissues. And those include the heart, the gastrointestinal tract, the kidneys, the skin, adipose or fat tissue, and again, the placenta during pregnancy. And we've had a question come in. Shannon says, "Hi Judith, you are breaking up quite a bit." Oh, I'm sorry. I wish I could do something about that. I'm not in control of that. Thanks for letting me know though. If there's something that you miss and you need me to repeat it, let me know. Can you tell me where I can get Iridology lens and flashlight from? I prefer using something that allows me to change the lighting. Amazon. Go to Amazon. Karen says she's not having a problem with the audio. So Shannon, it might be on your end. Sometimes that is a problem as well. But check Amazon and you can find lots of little pen lights there that have an LED light, which is a very white light, that are used by medical doctors. So that might be an idea as well. Sounds like you might have some experience in iridology, Shannon. So I'm glad you're here with us tonight. Let's look at some eyes then, because you know, as we do this, we're going to be looking specifically at markings and different things that teach us that we need to ask questions about the blood sugars. Okay, this is really important to remember that we ask questions. The first thing we are looking at is pigment. There are 3 different pigments or colors that can sit in an iris that suggest to us that we want to be talking about blood sugars. Now keep in mind that each of these pigments can mean other things as well. This is why we always want at least 2 or 3 indicators pointing to any one problem before we call it a problem, before we investigate too much further. So we are looking specifically for pigments that could be distributed generally through an eye or as specific little patches. And we are looking for dirty orange. We are looking for rust-colored things. And we are looking for dark brown. Shannon says it's probably your bandwidth. Yeah, it probably is, Shannon. I wish I could fix that for you. Amazon is where you want to look. And you want a variety of magnifications, Shannon. That's why I like the magnifier that has interchangeable lenses, because you want probably at least a 5x and a 10x, but if you can throw in a 3 or an 8 as well, that just gives you that much more flexibility. Okay, so at least a 5, at least a 10, maybe 3, maybe an 8 if you can find them. Back to our pigment discussion. Now again, these pigments, each of these pigments can actually speak of other questions or problems, but when we see 2 or 3 of them in the eye, we're really going to lean towards the questioning on blood sugar. And we do need to ask those questions. You're also going to notice that some eyes have a lot of pigment, like this eye has a lot of pigment in it. Some eyes have no pigment, no extra pigment whatsoever. The presence of pigment does not guarantee a problem. The absence of pigment does not guarantee a lack of problems. Because remember, what we're looking at is primarily what the body is capable of. But that doesn't mean that the person might not earn a problem, okay? So as we're looking at this eye, this is a client in her early 40s. She does not have any blood sugar imbalances, but she's got all 3 pigments. So I'm going to ask her questions anyways, because I need to, right? I need to start digging to understand how the pigment could be affecting her. And my questions are going to be related, first off, because she's not given any kind of suggestion that she's got a problem. I'm going to focus on family history. So I'm going to ask, is there a family history of type 1 diabetes or type 2 diabetes? Is there a family history? And I know she doesn't have a weight problem, but is there a family history of a weight problem? Is there a family history of hypoglycemia? Now, as I get to know my clients, I know what kind of jargon I can use and which jargon I can't. I wouldn't necessarily ask hypoglycemia on a first appointment. I might say, did anyone in your family have problems if they didn't eat on schedule or if they ate too many sugars? Right? Because those are often indicators of hypoglycemia. And in case she doesn't understand that word, I want to describe things in words that she will understand. I might ask, is there a personal or family history of elevated cholesterol? Because again, elevated cholesterol can go hand in hand with blood sugar disorders. Is there a personal or family history of high blood pressure? Right? And so we're going to ask all of those kinds of questions. And I'm going to make sure that she really does understand them. You know, I once had a client who came to me for stomach aches. It was a woman in her 30s. And I kept asking her digestion and elimination questions, and it just did not make sense. Her answers were not making sense. Finally, it dawned on me to say, can you take one finger and point to where the stomach aches are? And she didn't point up at her stomach. She didn't point at the intestines. She pointed to her uterus. And the challenge here was that she had been raised in a very strict Christian upbringing. She was not married. She lived with her parents still, and so she was not comfortable talking about female health issues. But by having her point to where does it hurt, it became clear. And I said, oh, so is this a problem with your monthly cycles? And she said, yeah, it is. And I said, so let's talk about that then, right? So I had to find the language that she would understand so that we could find the root of the problem. Here's another client. And again, we've got all 3 colors in the one eye. We've got the dark brown, the dirty orange, and the rust color. This woman has been a client of mine for 20 years. And I've watched her health do some interesting things. She's always had a stressful life, married to a man with post-traumatic stress disorder from being a civilian working with the military in Kosovo. And he'd had a history of being sexually abused as a young boy, and so she's dealt with a lot because of his problems. Because of that stress, particularly more recently as it's really escalated, she's gained a lot of weight. She's 5 feet 5 inches tall. She weighs nearly 200 pounds. She has a sedentary lifestyle, elevated cholesterol from the stress she's under, and she goes through fits and starts. She'll eat really, really well for a few months, and then the stress gets the better of her and she starts slipping again. Now, I specifically keep a tape measure in my desk, and I ask almost every one of my clients if I can measure their waist at their belly button. Now, why would I want to measure their waist at their belly button? And I'd like you to type your answers in. Take just a moment. I'm going to grab a drink of water while you're typing that in. What am I looking for by measuring their waist? And I will tell you, this is the easiest screening tool you will ever use, and medical doctors use this as well. Yeah, Karen, you've got it. You've got it. Yeah, Shannon, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, totally on the right track. Just waiting to see if anybody else weighs in on this. One of the first indicators that someone is pre-diabetic or is insulin resistant, which is a part of the metabolic syndrome, right? Metabolic X. Also, a real common problem with diabetes is they start putting on weight. So if you're working with a woman whose waist is more than 36 inches, or a man whose waist is more than 40 inches, that's your first screening tool for insulin resistant. So with this woman, of course, I took her measurement, even though I didn't need to. And I always ask my client if it's okay first. And if they say yes, I'll say, do you have any idea what your waist measurement is? And they'll give me a number, and I'll measure. And then I'll ask, do you want to know what it really is? And they usually say yes. They're usually off by at least 5 inches. Their waist is usually 5 inches larger than they thought it was. They're going by their pants waist measurement, which is totally irrelevant to anything. I don't know how manufacturers come up with those waist measurements for pant sizes, but totally irrelevant. So of course I measured her waist, and it was much bigger than she thought it was, and she was very disappointed in herself. But it gives us a starting point. We know she runs the risk of being insulin resistant because she's got all 3 pigments in her eyes, and she has stress that elevates her cortisol. So now we've got information that we can work with, and we can begin building a wellness program. And actually, she and her husband are getting a divorce. And so as that becomes final and she doesn't have to have a lot to do with him anymore, we will begin to see her cortisol come back to where it belongs, and we'll be able to get control of her diet and help her lose the weight and get healthy again. Here's another client. My practice is primarily female. I'm probably 90% female, because most of my practice is working with female hormone disorders. And so you're going to see a lot of female sides. Got a few male ones in here, but not too many. Female, age 35. She's slender, she's fit, and she's active. She has lots of dirty orange and some rust color pigment in her eyes. And why I'm concerned about pancreas and the possibility of insulin resistance with her is she's been trying for 3 years to get pregnant with absolutely no success. She hasn't gotten pregnant ever. It's not like we've got a track record of miscarriages. She has just never conceived. She has an excellent diet. But, you know, what we find with this is the pigments suggest that there's probably more to diet than what's going on here. I suspect what has happened with her, and she hasn't done the lab work for me yet, and I'm trying to encourage her to do it, but I suspect if she was to do a fasting blood test for glucose levels, that we would find that she is somewhere on the edge of normal rather than right down the middle. Now, one of the challenges we have with blood tests, of course, is that when they're done at a standard type of a lab, that lab uses the average of everybody who's really sick and really well to figure out what the normals should be. That just doesn't even make sense, does it? Why would we include people who are really unwell to figure out normal parameters? Yeah, it makes no sense whatsoever. But I think we would find this client comes out in the normal range, but on the edge of normal. And that she is probably insulin resistant in spite of all of the good things she does. You know, she doesn't drink alcohol. She doesn't crave carbohydrates. She isn't overactive. She is properly physically active. Her diet's primarily organic, and she's very conscientious. I mean, she's cut out gluten. She's done all kinds of things. I had to track down some other questions with her. I asked her if there was a family history of diabetes or obesity, and she said no, there was not. And so, you know, we just looked at that, and the next thing we needed to do was not just assess, is her diet clean, but does she have adequate protein and adequate DHEA and EPA in her diet? And as we looked at that, yeah, my feeling is that her protein was probably about half what it should be. Hormones are made up of protein and our essential fatty acids. So we've started building up her protein, but it's going to take a while for that to have an effect on her cycles. Her cycles are regular, but to have it balance out her hormones properly for her. So we also needed then to, as I looked at her eyes, and if you've been with me over some of these past webinars that I was doing in the fall, you'll know from looking at these eyes that her protein digestion is not great. And so she needs more protein, but she needs help digesting it. And that was another place that we were able to go with her to suggest you need 5 servings of protein, 2 to 3 ounces per day, primarily organic animal sourced, and we need some help with digesting that. And so that's what we're working on now, is to get things balanced out with her in that way. Here's another female, age 67. She's in good health overall. She's pretty active for her age. She has a decent diet, but, you know, she kind of likes her sugar just a little bit. You know, a little sweet treat after dinner every night kind of thing. No personal or family history of blood sugar issues, but she does have hypertension. And there's some other markings in her eyes that suggest that she is likely working with a liver enzyme issue that may be messing with her lipid panel, that her cholesterol levels might be going out of balance. Notice that she's got the orange and the rust in here. So she definitely has that leaning towards the pancreatic questions. Again, with her, we wanted to be building her protein. Her protein digestion is not quite as strong as we'd like it to be, so we needed to support her digestion. Needed to get her to eliminate the sugar, and needed to encourage a 30-minute walk every day. That's very important. Now, what happens for those of you who are practicing nutritionists? What happens when you tell someone they really can't have something in their diet, that they should stop eating something? What happens? If I tell you, you really shouldn't have this anymore, what is your reaction likely to be? Yeah, you can lose them. Absolutely. And do they sometimes turn into 3-year-olds? I do. But I want it. You can't take that away from me. I love that food. So the easier way, Karen, great idea. She says she tries to offer better options, often offering a substitute or trying to give them more things positive to include, knowing that it will eventually crowd out the bad stuff is good. Larissa asked, what signals protein digestion issues in an eye? We don't have time to talk about digestion tonight, Larissa. I'm sorry. That's actually a separate webinar that we did many weeks ago. But it's in there. And so that's something that, that we can cover, in the course or in things like that. But good question, and thanks for asking it. Really appreciate that. There's just not time to cover everything because boy, could we be here all night. Right, Karen? So nutrition to support healthy blood sugar levels. You already know this, right? Leafy greens, nuts, seeds, protein, vegan or not. I always try to include some vegan because they get more concentrated protein. Karen says, yes, we could be here all night. Water is good, whole grains, fiber, magnesium, chromium, vanadium, melatonin, antioxidants are really important. What do you know about vanadium or vanadilyl sulfate? Do you know anything about it? It's one of those micro trace minerals. What is its role in the body? Do you know? If you know, would you raise your hand? Oh, Larissa, I am so proud of you. Can you type in your answer? What do you know is one of vanadium's main roles in the body? Because this is an obscure one. A lot of nutritionists don't even know vanadium exists. Sugar metabolism, it sure is. Well done. Karen says she didn't. There we go. Thanks, Karen. Appreciate the honesty. Vanadium or vanadilyl sulfate increases insulin sensitivity. And so, Larissa, do you know what foods we can find vanadium in? What foods do we find vanadium in? Because, some people don't want to take extra supplements, right? So if we can teach them their foods, which I know we're all nutritionists, whole foods, yeah, whole foods, absolutely. Very specifically, if you need to pad that up, you also want to be thinking about parsley and dillweed. Interesting. Now, melatonin. This is another interesting one. Did you know that people who have low melatonin are at an increased risk for developing type 2 diabetes? So as you're asking all of these questions based on pigment, you maybe want to ask, how do you sleep? What besides a supplement would be some really good things that you could suggest to a person to do to help increase their melatonin production? Meditation can help. What else can you do? I have 2 recommendations that I make to anyone that has sleep problems. Omegas can be helpful as well. We need to start even before the omegas, though. Omegas come a little ways down the pathway here. The first one is I tell them they need to be outside for 20 to 30 minutes when the sun is the brightest, because we need serotonin to make melatonin. And we make serotonin under the influence of sunshine. And then in the evening, about an hour before they want to go to bed, they need to turn off all of their screens. That blue light that is emitted by our TVs, our phones, our tablets, our computers messes up how our body perceives that we're going into the evening. So we need to turn those off and dim the lights in the house somewhat to get the body to go, oh, it must be nighttime. I need to start converting serotonin to melatonin so I could go to sleep. So those are some pretty practical things that we see or we can recommend. Now here is the next marker. It's called polyglandular. Polyglandular isn't just a singular thing. It's not like a pigment color. Polyglandular and is actually what we call a physical integrity subtype. It's a physical integrity constitutional subtype. And where we have pigments that suggest an increased risk of blood sugar imbalances, polyglandular also suggests an increased risk of blood sugar issues amongst other hormonal issues. So what we're looking for is all of these little petal shapes that are attached to the outside edge of this line that's coming around, and this is called the collarette. When we see all of these petal shapes attached to the collarette, it's a strong suggestion that this person wants to have challenges, particularly with their pancreas, but also with the adrenals and the thyroid. Think back to your anatomy and physiology. Pancreas and adrenals and thyroid are all busy when it comes to blood sugar balance. They are all supposed to play nicely in the sandbox, so to speak. These are the pictures of a 24-year-old young man who has just recently moved to Canada from Taiwan. He's very slender. He likes his sugar. Like he'll buy bags of candy. His diet is very substandard, and this has me very worried about him because he falls into that category of eating Taiwanese foods that he can easily get here in North America and combining that with the worst of the standard American diet. That does not leave us with good chemistry. We know from research and studies that that mix of Asian and American is in the top 4 ethnic groups for the highest increases in type 1 and type 2 diabetes. Okay, really, really bad for blood sugar risks. The other groups in that category are the Latinos, African Americans, and Native Americans. Although from what I see in my practice, in my clinical practice, Caucasians, the North American bloodline is rapidly falling in behind. I asked this young man if there was a family or personal history of obesity. No, there's not. Of diabetes. No, there's not, because his family is all back in Taiwan eating traditional Taiwanese. They're not mixing the worst of both worlds. So with him, I had to suggest that he stop the candy, which he actually was really okay with. No temper tantrums on his part. That he be a little more focused on getting protein periodically through the day, and that he really increase his vegetable intake. And it's funny because whenever I see him, we pass in social circles at church and whatnot, and he'll say, "I'm eating more vegetables. Really, I am." It's darling to see how he has grasped that. Here's another polyglandular eye. Can you see here how we have lots of big petal shapes? We have some smaller ones, some very narrow ones, but lots of them scattered all the way around. So again, we're going to be asking about those blood sugars. Now, this is an interesting case because I want you to remember, as we're talking about her, the fiber structure is genetic. So these lacuna are what she was born with. That predisposition towards the pancreatic imbalance because of being polyglandular is what she was born with. The pigment may be genetic, but it may also be acquired. She may have done things to put the pigment there on her own. But because I didn't know her when she was 10 years old or even 2 years ago, I couldn't get eye photos to see if the pigment had changed at all. When we see pigment developing in an eye, it tells us that something is very active. It's been activated in the body. So we always want to be analyzing our clients' eyes at least annually to see if anything with the pigment has changed at all. Now, this is a female. She's age 27. And she has been a competitive bodybuilder for 4 years. She retired from that a couple of years ago. But in that 4-year time frame, she used steroids for 2 years. Now she has really got messed up metabolism. In those years of bodybuilding and steroid use, she became bulimic. And she now has to work with that all the time because her body is constantly telling her she needs to eat more. And she's not bulimic now, as in she doesn't purge, but she finds that the temptation to overeat is constant, and she has to be always vigilant. She's on an antidepressant, and that will often make you have a higher appetite as well. We know that people with a history of depression have a 60% higher chance of becoming insulin resistant. So in formulating questions to ask her, I needed to know what her body was like before she started bodybuilding. I needed to find out, did the carb cravings start before she was a bodybuilder or while she was a bodybuilder, or did they start after she quit bodybuilding? I needed to know her history on bulimia. Was she bulimic before she started bodybuilding or not? I also needed to know about family history. Any family history of blood sugar issues, hypertension, cholesterol, obesity, bulimia, anorexia, any of that, so I could ascertain even more if any of this was genetic or if any of this was strongly a learned pattern from her family. Okay, so those were the questions that we needed to ask. And with her, again, because of the bodybuilding, we really needed to get in there with proteins. She's still very active, but her body is craving. And when someone is craving carbs overboard, it's an indication the blood sugars are not balancing well. So we wanted to go in with proteins to stabilize those blood sugars. Now compare the lacuna in this eye and how fat they are to the lacuna in this eye. Notice how these are much narrower, much thinner. The flower petals or the leaves are much thinner, but they're still attached to the collarette, and there are a ton of them. So this is still a polyglandular eye. Okay. So with polyglandular again, we want to first off ascertain that we've got lots of lacuna. That tells us we've got the imbalances, probably tells us we want to ask about them anyways. And then if we're using an iridology map, we may want to look and see if any of these are sitting specifically in a zone that correlates to any of the endocrine glands, because many of the endocrine glands sit in this area in the eye all the way around. Okay, so this is a gentleman in his mid-50s. This is one of the few male photos I've got for you tonight. Now, he's got the pigment and he's polyglandular. So those two things make me want to ask about blood sugars. But, you know, he's fairly lean, fairly active, measured his waistline and it came out fine. But I decided to put him on a bioimpedance scale on the BioTracker to see what it would say about visceral fat. Now, visceral fat, as you know, is the fat that is tucked in around all of those internal abdominal organs. The more visceral fat you have, the more dangerous it is for your health. The upper limit for what we consider healthy normal is 15 pounds. So, of course, when we're getting up there in the 12, 13, 14, 15 range, we're starting to wonder, are we actually looking at some risks here? And actually we are with this man. He came out at 13. So even though he looks fairly good, he's got 13 pounds of fat tucked in around his gut organs. So that falls into the definition of skinny fat. You may have heard that term. It's one of those newer terms. And so we had to have that discussion because there's also indicators in his eyes that suggest liver enzyme imbalances that may be trying to mess up his cholesterol levels, which of course, if we've got that happening, that's going to increase his risks on all levels, including his blood sugars. Some things that mess up your blood sugar balance: smoking. Current smokers have been found to have major impairments in the action of their insulin. And it's the kind of impairments that can lead to full-fledged insulin resistance. So we want to be careful with smoking, as in we want to get our clients to stop if we can. Excessive alcohol intake messes up the blood sugars. For a man, that means more than 2 drinks per day. For a woman, it means more than 1 drink per day. And some of you might think that's not excessive, but where the blood sugar is concerned, it is totally excessive. Lack of physical exercise, high fat, high refined carbohydrate diet, fizzy drinks and alcohol. We know that fizzy drinks also block calcium assimilation, right? They deplete calcium. White sugar, refined sugar, white flour, excessive red meat consumption. These are all things that can mess up our blood sugar balance. You've heard me say a lot to eat a little more animal protein in balance. I never suggest that a person consume more than 50% of their protein from animal source. I like the other 50% to be vegan if it's at all possible. So hopefully you're starting to see how you can take iridology and integrate it with what you know to help you guide what you want to teach your clients. We've got an iridology class starting again, full-fledged, full-blown iridology, confident nutritionist, dynamic iridology. Here is the registration link. Make a note of it, but don't go there yet. Okay, iridology.education/confident-nutritionist-registration. The class will be starting on Wednesday, January 17th, and it runs till mid-June. We're offering it twice a day, just in case the 11 a.m. Mountain Time slot doesn't work for you. We are also offering it at 6 p.m. So if the evening slot works better for you, that is fabulous. Classes are limited to between 5 and 10 students per class because I like to give personal attention in class. Classes are delivered by webinar just like this, with one major exception. We unmute the lines for the entire class. So we have complete free give and take dialogue through the entire session. You get to ask whatever questions you want when they come up. Sometimes I will defer the question to a later lesson because it fits better there, but we have a ton of discussion to make sure that things are being answered and make sure that you're solid on what we're learning. Iridology is very much a building on process. So we need to make sure that what we are teaching right in the moment is well understood before we go on to the next topic. So here's what you will learn. You'll learn how to create programs right in your sessions and eliminate your unpaid homework time. You'll learn how to do a base assessment in 5 minutes or less without lengthy intake paperwork. Save time and do a better intake assessment. You'll learn how to ask only questions that are relevant to your client's needs. You know those intake forms that ask every question under the sun, whether it's important or not? Yeah, you're not going to do that with iridology, I promise you. You'll learn how to prioritize the problems your client needs help with. You'll learn how to connect what you know about nutrition and or herbology to what you discover using dynamic iridology. And you'll learn how to do a deeper assessment for more direction and understanding of your client's needs when it's needed. I'm going to invite you to stay with me because we still have more iridology to cover tonight as well. You're going to learn beginning to intermediate iridology and sclerology at a level that will prepare you for the IPA certification exam. This is International Iridology Practitioners Association. If you want to certify, some of my students don't want to certify, and I'm fine with that. And we've made a way for that to happen for them. We'll also tie in your nutrition and your herbology into the iridology so that it all makes sense. So I'm not really teaching nutrition and herbology, but I'm teaching you how to integrate it. Oh, let's talk about an iris sign again, a fermentation sign. First, I need to ask you, what kinds of foods ferment in the body? Let's have you type that in. What kinds of foods ferment in the body? What kinds of foods ferment in the body? Of course, Karen is a digestion specialist. That's the focus of her practice. So she's got this answer. Undigested proteins and fruit. Absolutely. Are there more things that can ferment in the body? Yeah, there are. There's a ton. Thanks, Karen. Appreciate you weighing in on that. So really, anything that contains sugar, whether it's natural sugar or refined sugar, will ferment in the body. What are some of the indications that we have that someone has fermentation going on? Oh, Shannon, yes, nice long list. Yeast, carbs, dairy, protein, sugars. Whoa, like anything you can eat can ferment, right? And how do we know someone is fermenting stuff? Gas, belching, and bloating, absolutely. A lot of gas. Yeah, absolutely. You are totally right. Totally right. Now, this sign shows up in the, oh, sorry, I'm supposed to have those up, duh. Okay, there we go. This sign, the fermentation sign, is in the sclera. Most of what we've talked about in the iris is genetic. Everything we talk about in the sclera is earned. So this person has this thickened blood vessel that ends in this really dark dot. It's usually dark blue or black. And there will often be a fuzzy edge to it or a bit of brown discoloration, kind of like a halo around it, something that's hanging on to the edge of it. That is a classic fermentation sign. And you can see that we have another one starting over here. It doesn't have the clouding around it yet, but it's got the dark dot. This is a female, age 67. And she's got a fairly decent diet, not perfect, but her family history is of dementia and actually stroke. She's got both. You probably already know that dementia is called type 3 diabetes because it has to do with insulin resistance in the brain, right? So when we see this fermentation sign, we know this person probably does not handle particularly their carbohydrates properly. They likely are carrying a yeast or a fungal infection of some kind as well because of the carbohydrate issues, because of that fermentation. So when we see the fermentation sign, we are going to want to go to ask them questions first off of, do they burp, do they belch, do certain foods really give them lots of gas? We also then want to find out if they are aware if they have a yeast or a fungal infection of some kind. And then we probably want to do some cleaning up, helping them clean up their diet, help them with their digestion, and help them clean out any kind of yeast or fungus that might be in there. Another question to ask when you see this sign is, do they have a strong history of using antibiotics? right? Because that will often set up a yeast infection of some description or a fungal infection of some description. Now, because this is an earned sign, it can also be unearned. It takes a lot of work, takes a lot of focus, it takes a lot of not cheating. And if the client will do their homework, we can fade this off. It might not disappear completely, but in the sclera, we can fade things off, and that shows us we're making progress. Now, we've talked a little bit about gas here. How do we know if their gas is from protein, from carbs, or if it's just air that was swallowed? What is the difference in the quality of the gas they could pass? Karen says protein smells very bad. Yeah, it sure does, because it's protein that has gone rotten meat in the gut. And so then what does carb gas smell like? Only nutritionists and herbalists could talk about this stuff, right? We do this all the time. We sometimes talk about it over dinner, my goodness. Yeah, Karen says that carb gas smells a little bit sweeter. It does. Smells a little bit sweeter. Here is another client of mine, female in her mid-50s again. You can see she's got a fermentation sign right here. We have what looks like it's going to be one right here. We have another one over here and up here, and here she's got lots of these. Now this is a naturopath, but she does like her wine. She actually really quite likes her wine. And she had a heart attack last year. Fortunately, it was mild and she's okay. But, you know, when we see the fermentation sign, we understand that her carbs are probably out of balance, that it may be a little bit insulin resistant. There might be some insulin resistance going on that could be affecting lots of things, including her cholesterol levels and things like that. And so we need to ask those questions. Does she have the high carb or high alcohol diet? Well, high alcohol, yeah, she probably does 2 glasses of wine a night, right? Is there a family history of blood sugar issues? Well, not that she was aware of. She's from Germany and she's been in North America for about 15 years now. Is there a family history of high cholesterol? And I look at her eyes and I go, well, she's got marks in her eyes that suggest she's going into high cholesterol, hypertension, obesity, depression. And so when we have all of these, we know where we want to start. With her, we want to start with balancing out her carbs, right? We want to stabilize that blood sugar and then do what we need to, if we need to get rid of any yeast or fungus that might be dilly-dallying around in there. So registration is open, but you're also probably wondering, what do you really get in the course, right? Well, it's 20 sessions long. It's about 40 hours. It's 2 hours per session. Live webinars like this, as we mentioned earlier. Each class is recorded in its entirety and posted on a student website. So you can go back and listen as often as you want to review. The content is edited into short video topics, short topic videos rather. So if you only need to review a little piece, you can. You don't have to listen to the whole 2 hours. You can just listen to the piece you want. And you've got access to this site for 18 months. Now, at the end of 18 months, what happens? You're not cut off. You're actually migrated to a special website that has, that is for my graduate students and my alumni, so that when you've finished your course, I keep that student site totally up to date and current. So it's got the latest of everything on it. If I learn something new, it goes there because it's going to be included in the course in the future, but you didn't get it in your course. So that site is kept up to date with new information as new research comes out. You also get a digital textbook that you download in weekly installments. You get the cheat sheets. Now, all of my students love these cheat sheets. What I've done is distilled the entire course down into chart format. So, description of the marker or the feature you're looking for in the eyes, symptoms you'd commonly see, questions to ask, nutrition, lifestyle, supplement things to recommend, so that it's just really succinct and easy to use. You're not flipping through a great big textbook. We do a lot of time reviewing. Like I said, we're building on previous training, so we always review to make sure we've got a solid foundation. Lots of in-class practice and interaction. And I'm really good at going over things. If a student is struggling, because this is a new science, right, for you probably, and if something's just not making sense, I've got 100 ways to review it until we find the one that resonates with you. You maybe have some credentials that require CEUs or continuing education. When you finish the course itself, just attending the class, and you've attended 80% of the classes, you get a certificate that says you did to give you proof for your CEUs. We have a private Facebook group for my alumni and my students, so we can carry on the conversation, discuss things, and give you support in between classes and after you finish your coursework. And we have a monthly Q&A that is open to my students and my alumni, where students and alumni present cases they're working on so we can discuss them and help them get right down to the nitty-gritty of what they need to do with their clients. So how much is the tuition? If you know right now that you want the training and you want to certify as an IPA certified iridologist, the tuition is $19.95 Canadian. Now, some of you are in the States, and that translates to about $14.95 US. So when you go online and you make your payment with your credit card or through PayPal, it's going to convert it. You'll see $19.95 Canadian, but your credit card statement will give you the American figure. This includes the complete course, everything I've already mentioned, and part 1 and part 2 of the IPA exam, and those are the parts that the instructors administer. Now, what if you're thinking, I really want to do it, but I don't have the $19.95 Canadian, or I don't want to certify. I don't think I want to certify. You can do the course for $14.95 Canadian, and it's the course only. So you're attending the classes, you're getting all the information, you're participating on the student and alumni sites, you're joining us for Q&As, but you're not going to necessarily do the exams. If you decide later on that you do want to certify, that is an option that's open to you. The IPA certification exam protocol is a 3-part exam. The first part I administer. I provide you with 10 iris analyses to do. You do the analyses, send them to me, I mark your work. You and I then spend an hour together reviewing your work, making sure you're solid, answering any questions you might have that came up as you did these, with me clarifying things that I maybe noticed in your work that are not quite right, or just giving you a pat on the back saying, way to go. If that's where you're at, that's great. Once you've done that, then we move on to part 2, which is a case study that IPA provides to me. I give it to you. You do the case study on your own time. You send it to me. I grade it. And then we meet again online for at least an hour to go over it to make sure you're really solid with it again. When you have completed those 2 parts, then I let IPA know that you are ready for your written exam. You submit the exam fee to IPA with the application form. They send back the exam. You do it as a 4-hour open book written exam, send it in, and they grade it for you. And if you get 80% on each of the 7 sections of the exam, you are certified. Sometimes we see all 3 iris signs in one eye. So here we have our fermentation signs. We have the polyglandular, and we have 2 different kinds of pigments. We know we are going to pursue asking all those questions, right? But there's so much more in this eye. We see digestive markers, we see more circulatory markers, we see things that teach us that this liver really needs some attention as well. Lots of things in that eye that I know you want to know about. So why would you want to study with me then? Well, I've been where you are. I understand the financial and time constraints of running a business, taking care of a family, home, friends, and other important commitments. I did this while having and raising 7 children. Our baby is now 19, so I'm feeling pretty liberated. But now I'm on the other end of the scale where my parents are aging and they're not well, and my husband's parents are aging and they're not well. So we've got those concerns. I get it. I understand learning needs. I was actually supposed to be a school teacher in my other life. I just about graduated as a school teacher and decided that wasn't for me to teach children in a classroom. I understand there's a lot to learn about iridology and sclerology, and it can be overwhelming, which is why doing an iridology course as 2 hours a week is, in my opinion, far superior to doing a 5 or 6 day course, because there's so much information that you simply couldn't absorb it all in 5 or 6 days. It's less expensive to study with a Canadian teacher and to study online. And I'm committed to you personally, to your learning. I'm not going to pass you off to an assistant. One of my recent students, who was already certified by 2 different schools, came into my course, and this is what she said: "It is the most amazing iridology course I've taken." Whoa. Judith's course is top on my list. She's enthusiastic and excited. Lots of examples and stories. Judith's iridology course is very informative, descriptive, and complete, as it contains the most accurate iridology, including sclerology, and most importantly, how to put it all together and make a proper assessment. I feel most confident in my nutritional practice now. Another recent student said the amount of learning in this course is enormous, and there's a lot of depth to this course. Judith's teaching is professional and easy to learn as she stops for questions, has great slides and reviews every week. Her students are her priority, and their understanding of the information is imperative. Allison goes on to talk about the Facebook page and the Q&A sessions. She was required to do an iridology course for some other holistic practitioning work that she was doing. Some of her classmates opted to do a correspondence course, and they struggled. Allison decided to do my course, and she said when she would get together with the other students to have study sessions and whatnot, she was often teaching them because their course didn't contain the depth that this course does. And from a student who's with us tonight online, Karen says, "Thank you, Judith. It's been such a pleasure studying under you and learning from you. I really miss our classes. You can tell my students mean a lot to me, but I'm looking forward to completing this and component of iridology and continuing my education." I should just let you read this because for some reason this is really touching me again tonight. Oh, yes, my heart is usually on my sleeve, folks. At any rate, Karen appreciated the class, and she still comes back, as she does to this tonight, to listen, to see, to refine some of her skills, and to just get that refresher, which is very cool. The tuition, again, $19.95 for the whole thing, $14.95 if you don't want to certify right now. And in case you're thinking, I want the course, but I don't have $19.95 right now, there's a for-pay of $549 to do the whole course. And there's a for-pay of $419 a month to do the course without the exams. And again, if you want to do the for-pay, just go to iridology.education/for-pay, confident-nutritionist-registration, stroll right to the bottom of the page. Karen actually says, I can't stay away. She's my groupie. At any rate, there's a payment plan. And so if you want to get in and start with this on January 17th, whether it's the morning session or the evening session, your choice, lots of flexibility in finding ways to be able to help you get in and do it. When is it again? Starts Wednesday, January 17th. It goes to late June 2018. Why wouldn't I give you a completion date? Because I'm not stuck on the idea that it has to be 20 sessions. As we go through the course, if I sense that we need an extra week or two to make sure we've got everything that we need, I add an extra week or two on. I make sure that we've got all the bases covered before we call the course done. Do remember as you're registering for this that daylight savings times ends sometime in March, and that will affect what time it shows up for you. Perhaps maybe you're in an area that doesn't do daylight savings time. So make sure you've got that all organized so you don't get messed up on attending classes. Karen says she learned something new tonight about vanadium. Very cool. I want to show you how easy it is to do that 5-minute initial assessment. All right. You can time me on this, absolutely. If you've got a stopwatch, go ahead. This eye's got a lot of information in it. First off, it's got that blue-gray background, which tells us this person is prone to elevated acid in their tissues. So I'm going to ask about things like asthma, allergies, arthritis, skin issues, and kidney concerns. Then I want to start at the center. I'm going to ask about digestive concerns because there's a lot of dark colors in here. I'm going to ask about gas, burping, belching, bloating. I'm going to ask if food ever sits heavy in the stomach. If there's foods that she's learned to avoid because they just don't feel good for her. Then I'm going to notice that she's polyglandular. This is one we learned tonight. And she's got orange in her eyes, dirty orange, and she's got the rust color. So I want to ask about the blood sugars. Do they tend to be up and down? Is there a family history of insulin resistance or diabetes? And then I'm going to look at where each of these is sitting to see what's going on with that. And I notice from the way they're sitting that we've probably got to ask some questions about the adrenal glands, probably have to ask some questions, really pointed questions about the pancreas as well. I'm going to come out here and I'm going to notice this fog. This fog tells me liver enzyme imbalance that may be leading to some issues with things like cholesterol problems. And then I'm going to pad that on top of what I see here and here. And these also suggest liver enzyme issues. And so I've got several things pointing to liver. I'm going to ask a lot of liver questions. This suggests a risk of kidney issues. Now, because this is in the sclera, it's more dynamic, not probably an inherited issue, but probably something that she's done to herself, maybe through poor food choices or through emotional imbalances, that she's cost herself some kidney function. Then I'm going to notice that we have this blood vessel that goes here, and I know this person's eyes. That blood vessel actually continues all the way around the top, comes down the side, and down here. That suggests some real major congestion in the circulatory system. And so I'm going to ask her, how's her blood pressure? I'm going to ask her again, has she had her cholesterol checked? Is there a personal or family history of any kind of arteriosclerosis or atherosclerosis? And we're going to then probably be asking more liver questions because liver is supposed to keep the blood fats in check. And we want to make sure the liver is doing that. When I've got those answers to all of those questions, I am likely going to start with recommending something for digestive support, probably cut out the coffee, and do probably some liver support. Karen asked, can we explain the kidney sclera sign? That's actually a super advanced sign that we didn't cover in class, Karen, and it's called a I can't even say the silly word, glomerulus, and it just means that the blood vessels have tangled up, and and it's been proven that it has a high correlation to kidney issues. It doesn't matter where it's sitting in the sclera, it just has a high correlation to kidney. All right, now we've looked at a lot of light colored eyes. Let's look at some darker eyes. This is that young Taiwanese man we looked at before. This is a female in her mid-30s. She is Asian as well. When we look at these eyes and we think, well, you can't see pigment. Well, actually we can over here. We've got a little pigment showing right there. But we don't see fiber structure. We don't see a lot of things in here. What can you see in a brown eye? We can see a lot. So we've already talked with this eye about polyglandular. Then we can talk about specific places where polyglandular is sitting. We can talk about digestive tract, particularly the intestinal tract, based on what we see with the collarette. We see that this young man is prone to a little bit of running in the sympathetic nervous system. So we may need to teach him how to meditate or how to chill a little bit. We have this haze, this white haze coming over the edge of the eye. Awfully young to do this. This is usually an acquired sign, although it can also be genetic. This is the one that goes back to the liver and how the liver enzymes are balancing the blood lipids. We notice that we've got some flattening at the top of his iris. We notice that he has a blue haze, a blue mauve haze hanging off the edge of his iris, speaks about a circulation concern. And we have these blood vessels here that make us wonder, what kind of allergies is he working with? All right, so there we go. So much there, so much. This one, again, this woman spends an awful lot of time in her sympathetic nervous system. We really need to work through that with her. This is not going to go away. This is genetic, but we need to help her know how to cope with that. Tons of allergy questions to ask when we see this. Liver enzyme and lipid questions to ask when we see this. The shape of the pupil also tells us that there have been some impacts where her spine is probably subluxed in a few places and has been for a long time. And so she may be experiencing some nerve feed problems to different parts of her body. So we can still see a ton, even in a dark brown eye, that would give us some indications of where we need to work and the questions we need to ask. When you know how to do iridology, you know how to get rid of your unpaid homework time. You know how to create the therapeutic sequences that will help you to help your clients be more successful and keep them coming back to continue their wellness journey with you. You'll be able to eliminate those lengthy intake questionnaires. You'll develop rapport within minutes because you're asking questions that are about your client. They're not about some hypothetical something somewhere. And you'll be way more precise in your work because you're asking the right kinds of questions. So I'm inviting you to hop on over to the website, get yourself registered, choose the payment plan that works best for you, and get in on this while the getting is good, so that we can get you into the student Facebook group right away. We actually have a Q&A session happening next week, and you would be invited to hang out with us on that Q&A session. Some of it might be a little over your head just yet, but hey, hang out with us and see. We're really nice people. And with that, my friends, that's it. Do you have any questions that you'd like to ask? Karen says, thank you. And I say, you're welcome, Karen. It's always a pleasure. Any questions about the course, how it runs? Larissa, you asked about protein digestion. There are at least 3 or 4 different indicators that can point to protein digestion problems. And so we actually, in the scope of the class, spend an entire class session working on, just let me get back to a slide where it would show up really well, working on what we call the nutritive zone. And so the nutritive zone is everything from the edge of the pupil to this line. And like I said, an entire 2-hour session just dealing with the nutritive zone. All right, so lots of thank yous. I'm glad you enjoyed it. And Karen says, feel better soon. I will. These things never last forever. And again, because we do have 40 hours in class, we go into a lot more depth than we could possibly do in a 1.5-hour intro session. So I hope you'll consider joining me for it. And I look forward to rubbing shoulders with you online, in class, and in more webinars. Take good care, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.